The morning I saw the lipstick stain on his collar, I knew my marriage had already ended. I just hadn't caught up to it yet. That was the moment everything inside me shifted, not outwardly. No, I kept my face blank, the way wives sometimes do when they've been trained by life to stay composed. But inside, something sharp sliced through me, clean, cold, unforgiving. It was a Tuesday, just another ordinary weekday in our small, quiet life. The kettle was whistling, my toast was burning, the neighbor's dog had been barking since dawn. Nothing felt dramatic or unusual until he walked into the kitchen wearing a shirt he never wore to work, smelling faintly of a perfume I didn't own. He leaned in to kiss my cheek like he always did, but this time, when he bent forward, the collar of his shirt shifted just enough for me to see it, a soft coral smudge, right at the rim. Not my color, not my shade, not my world. I didn't say a word. I just stepped back slightly, pretending to reach for the butter knife. My hand trembled, not from anger, not yet, from recognition, because deep down, I already knew. He'd been distant in those subtle, creeping ways. The late-night showers, the new passwords, the sudden work emergencies. He'd stopped sitting beside me during movies, stopped asking how my day was. Even when we were in the same bed, I felt him drifting like a boat pulling away from the shore, slow enough not to splash, but fast enough to lose sight. But I had convinced myself it was stress, work, fatigue, married life. You know, all the excuses women hand themselves so they don't have to face the truth. That morning, as he grabbed his keys and rushed out with a forced smile, I noticed two more things. His hair was styled differently, and he smelled like warm vanilla and citrus, a scent that didn't belong to our closet. The door clicked shut. I stood in the kitchen, toast burning, kettle screaming, heart pounding. And I whispered to myself, "It's happening." But I didn't cry. Not yet. Tears only come when pain is shocking. This wasn't. This felt inevitable, like watching a storm roll in after seeing the sky darken for hours. I slid the toast into the sink, turned off the stove, and sat down at the kitchen table. My palms pressed against the cool wood, grounding me. I focused on the ticking clock on the wall, each second steady, unforgiving, like it was counting something down. Maybe my sanity, maybe my marriage, maybe both. Before everything went wrong, you should know something about me before I take you deeper into this story. I wasn't always suspicious. I wasn't always careful. I wasn't always strategic. Once I was a soft-hearted woman who believed that love protected itself, that if two people promised each other forever, forever simply happened. My husband, Daniel, was the man I chose with my whole heart, the man I loved fiercely, maybe too fiercely. When we married, I thought I had won the kind of life my mother always prayed I'd find. Stability, a partner who cared, a home where laughter lived in the corners. And for a while, we had that. Or at least I believed we did. We met in college. I fell for him fast. His easy smile, his kindness, the way he made even the smallest moments feel important. He wasn't the loudest person in the room, but he had this quiet charm, the kind that made people relax around him. He used to bring me flowers for no reason. He used to write me notes and hide them in my books. He used to talk about our future like it was a light we were walking toward together. But marriage changes people, not because love disappears, but because life gets busy, responsibilities pile up, bills come in, work gets heavier. And somewhere between building a life and surviving it, we lost the warmth we once shared. I wanted a baby. He said, maybe later. Then after the bonus. Then after the promotion. Then he stopped answering. I should have known then, but I didn't. I chose to believe in the rhythm of routine. Breakfast, work, dinner, bed. That quiet illusion that makes you think everything is fine because nothing has exploded yet. 3 weeks before the lipstick stain, things had already started unraveling. He began guarding his phone, not just casually, aggressively. I'd walk into the room and he'd tilt the screen away. I'd sit beside him on the couch and he'd reposition himself like my eyes were lasers that could burn through his secrets. He changed his lock screen. Twice. In 1 month. He started stepping outside for phone calls, something he had never done in our marriage. Daniel wasn't the type to hide anything. Usually, he'd talk loudly, laughing, pacing around the house. Now his voice was low, cautious, almost rehearsed. The night I heard him whisper, "I'll see you tomorrow," my stomach twisted so suddenly I had to sit down. But when I walked into the living room, pretending to look for a charger, he ended the call with a cheerful, "Okay, Mom." He thought he was clever, but I knew his mother's tone, and I knew she didn't call him at night, not since her arthritis worsened. Still, I didn't confront him. Not then. Because I wasn't ready to hear the truth. You see, betrayal doesn't hit you all at once. It leaks into your life slowly, like water under a door. You notice the floor is wet long before you see the flood. The night everything became clear, a week after the lipstick morning, I found the receipt. I wasn't even snooping. Not at first. He had left his jacket hanging on the dining chair, and his wallet slipped out when I lifted it. The receipt was folded, inside, crisp, fresh, like it had been placed there intentionally. A restaurant, a reservation, 2 entrees, 2 drinks, a dessert he never ordered with me. But the worst part? The date, the time, the signature at the bottom. His! The night he told me he was working late, that night I ate leftovers alone. That night he didn't pick up when I called. That night he came home smelling like mint gum and guilt. For the second time, I didn't cry. I simply folded the receipt and placed it gently back inside the wallet, because that was the moment my heart hardened, not with anger, but with clarity. He wasn't just cheating. He was comfortable cheating, careless, confident, arrogant enough to believe I would never question him. And maybe I wouldn't have if he hadn't smiled at me the next morning like nothing had happened, if he hadn't held my waist while I cooked breakfast, if he hadn't pecked my cheek, saying, "You're my whole world, babe." Hypocrisy has a smell, sickly sweet, like rotting fruit. I smelled it on him that morning. That was the day I made my decision. Not to leave, not to scream, not to beg, but to trap him. Slowly, quietly, perfectly. With the one thing he never expected from me. A pregnancy. A fake one. I didn't sleep that night. Not really. I lay beside him, listening to the rhythm of his breathing. Steady, untroubled, peaceful. The kind of sleep only people without guilt enjoy. His arm was draped over me, heavy, familiar, but it felt wrong, like it no longer belonged there, like his touch was a lie. I stared at the ceiling and whispered into the darkness, "You don't love me anymore, do you?" Of course he didn't answer. He just exhaled softly and shifted closer, his warm breath brushing against my neck. Once that warmth comforted me, now it made my skin crawl. I knew if I confronted him then, he'd deny everything. He'd spin some excuse. It's a coworker. It's my boss. It's not what it looks like. He'd gaslight. He'd flip it on me. He'd call me insecure. And I wasn't going to give him that power. No. If he wanted to play games, I was going to play better. That night, around 3 a.m., I slid out of bed, barefoot, careful not to wake him. The tile was cold beneath my feet,
and the house hummed with the kind of stillness that makes every sound louder. I stood in front of the bathroom mirror and looked at myself. Really looked. My eyes were tired. My face looked older than I remembered. My shoulders slumped with months of confusion and loneliness. "Who are you becoming?" I whispered to the woman staring back at me. A tear welled, but stopped halfway down my cheek. Because I realized something important. I didn't deserve this. Not the doubt, not the betrayal, not the endless nights waiting for him to come home. Something inside me began to harden. Not bitterness, not yet. Just resolve. A quiet, powerful resolve. I wiped my face and walked back to bed. But this time, I slept facing away from him. You can tell when a man is cheating. Even if he thinks he's the smartest liar alive, his habits, they give him away. Daniel was no different. First, he started going to the gym early in the morning, something he had never done before. Daniel hated mornings. For 7 years of marriage, he'd grumble every time the alarm rang. But now, suddenly, he was up at 5:30 a.m., showered, dressed, and spritzed with cologne. For the gym? Sure. Then he bought new clothes. Not work clothes. Casual evening wear, which he claimed were on sale. He started humming when getting ready. Not tunes we used to like. New songs. Songs he said he heard on the radio, though he didn't remember the lyrics. Then there were the lies. Small, clumsy, but constant. I'm working late. I'm meeting a client. I'm grabbing drinks with the guys. I'm heading to the new project site. I'm helping a coworker move. Funny how so many lies can fit into one man's mouth. And each time, I nodded. I smiled. I kissed him goodbye. Because he didn't know the truth. I was watching his every move. Every pattern. Every shift. Every crack in the facade. If he wanted to act like someone else's man, I would make him act like mine first. The idea came to me on a Wednesday afternoon. I was sitting alone in the bedroom, folding laundry, a chore that suddenly felt unbearably pointless. His shirts, his socks, his neatly pressed pants, everything felt heavy with betrayal. I held one of his shirts against my chest and whispered into the silence, "Why are you doing this to me?" But the only answer that came was the memory, the one argument we had 6 months ago. Me, "Daniel, I think we should start trying for a baby." Him, without looking up from his phone, "Not right now. I'm not ready." Me, "When will you be ready?" Him, shrugs, "I don't know, just not now." He didn't even look at me. Not once. Later that night, I overheard him talking to someone on the phone. He said, "Kids ruin everything. I don't want that responsibility." I pretended I didn't hear, but I did. It buried itself inside me like a shard of glass. So when the idea finally formed, it made too much sense. If he didn't want a baby, if he feared responsibility, if he thought children were a burden, then a pregnancy would force him to show his true face. Would he confess? Would he crumble? Would he run? Or would he pretend harder? Either way, I would win. I grabbed my phone and dialed the clinic. "Hello, I'd like to schedule a prenatal checkup," I said calmly. The receptionist didn't ask many questions, just a date and time. "Friday at 11? she confirmed. Thank you, I whispered. When I hung up, my hands were trembling, not from fear, but something far more powerful. Purpose. That night, exactly as I expected, Daniel came home late. Almost midnight. He smelled like hotel soap. Not our soap. Not the one we bought together last month. Hotel soap. You learn to recognize things like that. Scents, fabrics, energy. He walked into the living room where I was pretending to watch a movie. Hey, he said, trying to sound casual. You're awake. I couldn't sleep, I replied softly. He sat beside me, but not too close. A safe distance, emotionally and physically. Long day? I asked, gently, eyes still on the screen. Yeah, the client meeting dragged on forever. Which client? I asked, gently. He hesitated. Just a fraction of a second, but I saw it. The Henderson Project. There was no Henderson Project. I nodded slowly. You should shower. You smell tired. He blinked at me, studying my expression, but I smiled, calm, soft, the loving wife. He relaxed and went upstairs. That was the moment I said it, loud enough for him not to hear. You are going to pay for this, Daniel. Not with anger, but with truth. The next morning, I stood in front of him with a soft, almost shy smile. Can we talk? He looked nervous instantly. Guilt does that. Sure. I sat beside him, took a gentle breath, and said the sentence that would trap him slowly, beautifully, perfectly. Daniel, I think I'm pregnant. His face froze. I studied every micro-expression, the twitch of his eyebrows, the tightening of his jaw, the slight widening of his eyes. Shock, panic, fear, but above all, guilt. Except he didn't say what a loving husband would say. There was no joy, no, are you serious? No excitement, just a flat, fragile, oh. And that oh told me everything. Everything I needed to know. Everything he had suspected. Everything he had tried to hide. Oh, I repeated quietly, tilting my head. Is that all? He swallowed hard. No, I mean, that's great. It's great news. But his voice shook. He didn't hug me. He didn't touch me. He didn't even smile. I smiled for both of us. Oh, Daniel, I whispered, our lives are about to change. He nodded stiffly. If only he knew how right I was.
Daniel didn't touch me for the rest of the day, not even accidentally. He walked around the house like a man trying to avoid landmines, careful with every step, every word, every glance, as if the simple act of looking at me might expose him. It was beautiful to watch. For years, he had been the one controlling the narrative, the busy husband, the tired man, the victim of my overthinking. But now, he was the one anxious. He was the one performing. He was the one avoiding mistakes. I just had to sit back and let him unravel. And he did. Slowly. Perfectly. When we woke up the next morning, he was already sitting at the edge of the bed, hands clasped, shoulders stiff. Morning, I whispered softly. Morning, he replied, but his voice was distant, careful. Are you okay? I asked innocently. He nodded too fast. Yeah, I'm fine. Just thinking. About the baby? He flinched. Yes, he said. About everything. He stood up and pretended to stretch, but his eyes kept darting everywhere except toward me. What do you want for breakfast? I asked sweetly. Nothing. I'm running late for work. But he didn't reach for his tie, or his shoes, or anything really. He just stood there, frozen, lost. I tilted my head, studying him like he was a character in a play whose lines he'd forgotten. You sure you're okay? I asked again. This time, he didn't answer. He just grabbed his phone, stared at it for a few seconds longer than necessary, then walked out of the bedroom without another word. I smiled into the pillow. This was going exactly how I needed it to. Around noon, I heard him in the hallway. His voice was sharp, hushed, and frantic. The voice of a man cornered. He thought I was asleep. He thought wrong. I stayed behind the doorway, silent as breath. I don't know what to do, he hissed into the phone. She says she's pregnant. A pause. More silence. Then a woman's voice, muffled, but unmistakable. I couldn't hear every word, but I caught enough. You said you don't want children. You promised. What about us? My heart didn't break. Not this time. Instead, it folded into a cold, steady calm. So there was another woman, and she wasn't just a fling. She was emotionally invested, insecure, territorial, perfect, absolutely perfect. Daniel murmured urgently, "Just calm down, don't freak out." More muffled words, more panic from her side. Then Daniel said something that would stay with me forever. I'll handle it. Just give me time. Handle? Handle me? I stepped back, silently, before he turned around. Let him think he had the upper hand. He had no idea the ground under him had already cracked. Friday came quickly. Too quickly for Daniel. I woke up early, humming softly as I got dressed in a pale blue shower camise. Daniel sat at the table, untouched breakfast in front of him, looking like he hadn't slept at all. Ready? I asked gently. For what? I smiled. For the prenatal appointment, Daniel. Remember? Today, at 11. He froze. Do we have to go? He asked, voice tight. Yes, I said sweetly. I want to make sure everything is okay. He swallowed hard, looking everywhere but at me. Right. Of course. I'll take the day off. I pretended not to notice the way his hands shook. The waiting room smelled faintly of antiseptic and lavender. Soft music played in the background, the kind that tried and failed to soothe nervous patients. I sat beside Daniel, lightly holding his hand. He didn't hold back. His fingers were stiff, cold. I looked at him with shining eyes and whispered, I'm happy, Daniel. He forced a smile, lips tight. Yeah, I'm too. A pathetic lie. Mr. and Mrs. Hale, the nurse called. We stood. Daniel walked like a man being led to his execution. The doctor greeted us warmly, but Daniel barely responded. I lay back on the cushioned bed, lifting my shirt slightly as she prepared the gel. Are you excited? She asked kindly. I am, I replied. Daniel remained silent, jaw clenched, eyes glued to the floor. The doctor pressed the device to my stomach, moving slowly, searching. Seconds passed, then a minute. The doctor frowned, not in concern, but confusion. Daniel's head snapped up. What? He asked sharply. She glanced at me with a soft smile. It's very early. Hard to detect anything yet. How far along did you say you are? Before I could speak, Daniel blurted out, Maybe she's mistaken. His voice was too loud, too urgent, too desperate. The doctor looked at him, startled. I just smiled at the ceiling. It happens, she continued gently. Sometimes the cycle shifts. It's normal. Daniel exhaled in obvious relief. The doctor printed a blank scan, nothing on it but fog.
It may be too early to see the embryo. Come back in 2 weeks. We should see more by then." 2 weeks? Daniel choked. "Yes," she said kindly. "Nothing to worry about." Nothing for her to worry about. Everything for him. The drive home was silent. Daniel kept his eyes locked on the road, knuckles white around the steering wheel. "You're quiet," I said softly. "Just tired," he said. "Are you worried about the baby?" "No," he said too quickly. "It's just a lot to process." I rested my hand over his. He flinched. Not dramatically, just enough for me to feel it. "Daniel," I whispered, "do you not want this baby?" His jaw tightened. He didn't answer. "I thought we were ready," I continued, voice small, trembling just enough. "But if you're not happy—" "I'm happy," he snapped, instantly regretting the harshness. I turned my face away, hiding my smile. "Okay, if you say so." He swallowed hard. "I'm sorry, I'm just stressed." "About what?" "Work," he lied. "Always work." When we pulled into our driveway, something unusual happened. A car passed slowly in front of our house. A silver sedan. Windows tinted, but I caught a flash of a woman inside. Young, sharp features, hair tied up, gaze locked on me. Not on Daniel, on me. She looked away quickly as the car sped up. Daniel's face drained of color. "Who is that?" I asked, softly. "No one." He forced a laugh, but his voice? Shaking. And in that moment, I knew exactly who she was. The other woman, the insecure lover, the woman who needed reassurance and wasn't getting it. Good. Let her watch. Let her worry. Let her see me standing beside him in my driveway, hand resting gently over my stomach. Let her wonder what place she really had in his life. Let them both feel the walls closing in. Because this was only the beginning.
For the next 3 days, Daniel hovered nervously around me, like a malfunctioning robot. He fetched things before I asked. He smiled too much. He complimented my cooking, my hair, the weather, anything to sound normal. It was painful to watch. A man who once moved with confidence now stumbled through every moment, every glance, every sentence. And I let him. I let him carry the weight of his lies. But the universe has a funny way of speeding up a downfall. Because on the 4th day, she snapped. It was nearly 6 p.m. I was preparing tea in the kitchen when I heard it, a frantic, borderline violent knock. Not the polite two-tap, not the neighborly hello. This was a demand. "Daniel?" I called. He was in the living room, fidgeting with his phone. He froze. His eyes widened, as if he already knew. "Don't answer it," he whispered. I raised an eyebrow. "Why not?" He swallowed, throat bobbing. It's probably someone selling something." "At 6 p.m.? Sure, why not?" The knock came again, harder. Before Daniel could stop me, I walked to the front door and opened it. And there she was, the woman from the silver sedan. Heart-shaped face, sharp, restless eyes, a messy bun that suggested she got ready in a rush. She looked me over like I was a stain she'd only heard about but never actually seen. Her lips curled slightly. "So, you're her." Her voice wasn't soft or polite. It was edged with anger and fear, the kind that grows in someone who's been promised something and now realizes it may slip away. I kept my expression calm. "And you are?" She blinked, almost offended. "I'm a friend of Daniel's." Behind me, Daniel materialized like a ghost. "Lily," he breathed. Lily. So this was her name. She snapped her head toward him. You didn't answer my calls. Because I said I needed space, he hissed under his breath, the way someone scolds a child throwing a tantrum in public. I folded my arms gently. Daniel, what's going on? He opened his mouth. Lily beat him to it. Did he tell you? Daniel's face drained. Lily, don't... Tell me what? I asked softly. She jabbed a finger toward me. That he doesn't love you anymore. Daniel grabbed her wrist. Stop. She yanked her hand away. That he wants to be with me. Silence. Cold, thick, unbreathable silence. I looked at Daniel. He looked at the floor. That was all the answer I needed. Lily took a step toward me. Her eyes were wet, but her jaw was tight. He told me you were basically roommates. He said you were miserable together, that you barely touched each other. Daniel groaned. Lily, please. But when you said you're pregnant, his eyes flicked to my stomach. He started ignoring me, telling me to calm down. Suddenly, you mattered again. She turned back to Daniel, voice cracking. So which is it, Daniel? Am I the fool? Or is she? Her words echoed. A perfect question. A needed one. One I wanted him to answer. Daniel rubbed his temples, looking like he wished he could dissolve into the wall. No one's the fool, he mumbled. This is just complicated. Complicated? Lily exploded. You told me you didn't want kids. Ever. You said this marriage was basically dead. I blinked. He had always told me he wanted 3 children. He looked between us, trapped, cornered, suffocating. Lily, we should talk privately, he whispered urgently. No, she snapped back. No more secrets. No more hiding. I want the truth. She turned to me again. How far along are you? About 6 weeks, I said calmly. Lily laughed, a harsh, broken laugh. So you know. She leaned closer. You know he was cheating on you, right? You're not stupid. Daniel stepped between us. Lily, no, she shot back. She deserves to know. She pointed to me again. He told me he was leaving you. I absorbed the words peacefully, like they were raindrops, not daggers. But inside, it wasn't pain or heartbreak. It was confirmation. Solid, precise, useful. Daniel gaped at me, eyes pleading. It wasn't like that. Then how was it? I asked softly. He opened his mouth. No words came out. Lily scoffed. Pathetic. I need to speak to my husband alone, I said quietly. Lily threw her hands up. Whatever. Just know he lied to both of us. She turned sharply and marched away, slamming her car door. The engine roared as she sped off. Daniel stood motionless in the doorway, shoulders hunched, breathing hard. I closed the door quietly behind us. He didn't speak. He didn't breathe. He looked like a man standing on the edge of a cliff, waiting for a push. I stepped closer, not too close. Daniel, I said calmly, is it true? You were leaving me? He rubbed his forehead, voice small. I didn't know what I wanted. No, you did know. Silence. You wanted her. He winced. I made a mistake. Which one? Lying to her? Or lying to me? He squeezed his eyes shut. Both. I studied him quietly. For once, he wasn't defensive. He wasn't angry. He wasn't manipulative. He was simply exposed. A man cornered by the consequences of his own choices. Good. Very good. He sank on the couch, trembling, not from guilt, but from fear. Fear of the situation, fear of losing control, fear of a future he hadn't planned for. And I needed that fear. I sat across from him, calm, composed. "Daniel," I began softly, "we need to talk about the future." He looked up sharply. "What future?" "Our baby's future." His face twisted. "We don't even know if—" I lifted a hand to stop him. "We will know in 2 weeks." He looked nauseous. "Good. Until then," I continued, "I expect honesty. Complete honesty." He swallowed. "Okay. No more hidden calls. Okay. No more meetings with her?" He hesitated. A long, trembling pause. "Okay." I nodded that probably. "Good. I want this to work, Daniel." He looked at me, eyes tired, defeated, desperate. "I'll do better," he whispered. "I promise." I smiled gently. "I know." But inside, I whispered, "You'll do exactly what I need you to." Because he had no idea the next phase of my plan had already started. And soon, he would realize this baby, real or not, wasn't the trap. I was.
Daniel didn't come home that night. I waited at the kitchen table long after the sun slipped behind the oak trees, long after the house settled into that soft nighttime quiet that used to comfort me. But now every creak, every shifting breeze against the window made my heart jolt like a trapped bird. His car never pulled into the driveway. His footsteps never hit the hallway. His voice never called my name. Only the clock, steady, unbothered, ticked on, like time itself was dispassionately watching my life fall apart. By midnight, I finally stood up, the wooden chair groaning as if protesting the hours I'd forced it to hold my grief. I walked to the window and peered outside one more time, uselessly checking the empty street. Nothing. I swallowed the ache rising in my chest and told myself what I needed to hear. This isn't your mistake, Anna. This is evidence. Daniel returned at 6:17 a.m. I know the exact time because I was standing in the hallway in my robe, hair tied up, face washed, eyes sleepless but alert. I heard his key scrape against the lock, clumsy, hesitant. The sun was barely a suggestion behind the horizon. When the door finally swung open, he stepped inside as though entering a stranger's house. His shirt was wrinkled, his eyes were red, his hair was a mess. And beneath all that, guilt clung to him like perfume. He froze when he saw me. "Anna?" he said softly. "Why are you awake?" I didn't blink. "Why weren't you home?" He shut the door behind him cautiously, as if the truth might burst out through the gap. "Work ran late," he muttered, not even putting effort into the lie. I tilted my head slightly. "Till 6 in the morning?" He swallowed, his throat bobbed. "You should have told me you were staying out," I whispered, keeping my voice calm, disturbingly calm. I saw the way it shook him. Cheaters expected screaming, crying, begging, but silence, composure, that terrified them. He rubbed his face with both hands, then sighed. "Look, can we talk after I shower? I'm tired."
I stepped aside, letting him pass. But as he walked by, I caught a scent clinging to him. Not perfume, not sweat, a faint trace of something sweet. Coconut lotion. My stomach tightened. Lily always smelled like coconut lotion. When he disappeared into the bathroom, I leaned against the wall and shut my eyes. The sound of running water filled the hallway. If I listened closely enough, I could still hear his lies trying to weave themselves into something believable. But I didn't need explanations anymore. Now I needed control. So I sat down at the dining table, pulled out my small leather-bound notebook, and began writing down everything. His late arrival, his scent, his reaction to my pregnancy reveal, his missing ring from last night. The ring details still bothered me. He had worn it every day for years without fail. For it to suddenly vanish meant he wanted to look available. I tapped my pen against the table, thinking. Then Daniel walked out, hair damp, wearing a navy shirt and jeans, casual, comfortable, as if he hadn't just punctured the fragile world I'd carefully built with him. He approached me slowly, cautious. "Anna, I'm sorry about earlier." "What part?" He blinked. "What do you mean? The late night? The lies? Or the way you reacted to my pregnancy?" Pain flickered across his face, but not the pain of empathy, the pain of being trapped. He sat across from me, elbows on the table, palms loosely clasped. "The baby, it caught me off guard. That's all." I nodded. "I understand. Surprise can be overwhelming." Then I let a soft, almost warm smile touch my lips. "But I'm glad we're in this together." His shoulders tensed. Because he wasn't. Not anymore. The cracks in his armor. For the next few days, Daniel tried to act normal. He brought home groceries, he asked about doctor dates, he even placed a hand on my stomach once, pretending to bond with the baby that didn't exist. But he had tells. He couldn't hold eye contact for long. His phone was always upside down. He showered the second he got home. He slept facing the opposite direction. And he couldn't keep track of his excuses. They changed daily. One night, I was at the office late. Another, we had an unexpected client meeting. Then my car broke down. Then I forgot my phone charger, so I didn't call. Forgetfulness became his shield. Cheap, flimsy, transparent. And every time he lied, I responded with the exact same tone. Soft, calm, unafraid. Cheaters collapse faster when you stop giving them something to push against. The hidden phone. On the 5th day after my big announcement, Daniel took a call outside again. I watched him from the kitchen window as he paced near the driveway, his hand scraping through his hair repeatedly, his anxious tell. He was whispering, angled away from the house, shoulders hunched, protective over the phone. Every sign pointed to guilt, but I needed proof, real proof, and proof requires opportunity. When he came in later, still distracted, I casually asked, "Can you help me bring the box of baby books from the top shelf in the closet?" He followed me upstairs without hesitation, unaware that this request wasn't random. Because while his body went up the stairs, his phone stayed downstairs on the couch. Unattended, unlocked, buzzing. My heart raced, but my face stayed serene. Daniel reached up for the box, deliberately high, giving me the seconds I needed. "Wait, I think I labeled it wrong. I'll check the other side." He turned slightly. Not fully, just enough that the moment felt tight. So I softened my voice. "Baby, you don't need to strain. Let me move the step stool." He relaxed a bit, turning back to the shelf. And that was all I needed. I moved quietly down the stairs, each step as careful as a whispered secret. The phone lit up again on the couch. My pulse jumped. Lily. Did you talk to her yet? We can't delay forever. My eyes narrowed. Another text appeared instantly. I'm tired of hiding, Dan. You promised. Another buzz. A photo this time. The room spun slightly when I saw it. It was Daniel. Asleep. Shirtless. On someone else's bed. A warm-toned room I had never been in. The sheets were pale pink. My stomach tightened painfully, but I forced myself to breathe. For Daniel's lies to collapse, I needed to stay standing. His footsteps sounded faintly upstairs. I had seconds. I quickly forwarded the photo to my email, then, calmly, placed the phone exactly where I found it. When I climbed back up the stairs, he was still fiddling with the box. I smiled softly. Found it? He nodded. As if nothing was wrong. As if I hadn't just seen the truth he'd been burying under months of deception. That night, I lay beside him in bed, pretending to sleep, staring at the faint moonlight brushing against the wall. The photo replayed in my mind. Her bed, her sheets, her hands probably taking the picture, his bare chest, his ring missing, his smile, the one he hadn't given me in months, but instead of crying, a strange calm settled over me. My plan had shifted. The fake pregnancy was no longer revenge. It was strategy. It was power. It was time. It was finally seeing him exactly as he was and realizing that I didn't have to beg for his loyalty. Because men like Daniel, they only understand consequences. And I was done giving him warnings. The next part of my plan would begin in the morning. I turned slightly, watching the rhythm of his sleeping back, the same back I once leaned on for support. Now, it only reminded me how far away he had already drifted. Before sleep finally came, I whispered to myself, he broke the vows, now I break the illusion.
I woke before Daniel the next morning. The house was still, painted in that pale bluish light that makes everything look honest. I slipped out of bed quietly, letting the cold floor kiss the soles of my feet as I walked toward the kitchen. I didn't feel weak. I didn't feel confused. I felt ready. The photo Lily had taken of him, sprawled across her rose-colored sheets, was burned onto the inside of my eyelids. I didn't need to reopen it. I didn't need to zoom in, analyzing the details like I used to torture myself with. That stage of my grief had passed. Now the grief had become something sharper, strategic, alive. I put the kettle on and leaned against the counter. As the water heated, I watched the steam curl upward like a quiet promise. Today wasn't just another day of pretending. Today was phase 2. Daniel shuffled into the kitchen about 20 minutes later, rubbing the sleep from his eyes. "Mornin'," he mumbled, his voice groggy. I smiled lightly. "Morning." My calmness threw him off. He blinked twice, studying me as if I were a riddle he hadn't prepared for on an exam. Maybe he expected me to bring up last night, or the nights before that, or the way he smelled faintly of someone else's lotion, even after 2 showers. But I didn't mention a thing. Instead, I handed him a mug of tea. "You should drink something. You look exhausted." He took it with a slightly confused nod. "Rough week." "I know," I said sweetly. Oh, how I knew. I sipped my own tea. "By the way, I scheduled something for us today." His hand paused midair.
Something? Yes, I replied, setting my cup down with deliberate gentleness. Our first prenatal appointment. His face went pale. I watched every micro expression like a scientist, the quick panic in his eyes, the tiny flinch at the word prenatal, the tightening of his jaw, the subtle exhale, controlled but shaky. Isn't it too early for that? He asked. No, I whispered, smiling, right on time. He swallowed so hard I heard it. Daniel sat down at the table too quickly, nearly missing the chair. His voice was choppy when he spoke again. Anna, I don't know if I can go today. I have a meeting. I cut him off softly. Daniel, sweetheart, this is our first baby appointment. His jaw flexed. He hated when I spoke with that soft, steady tone, because calmness left him with no place to hide. It's important we both go, I continued. He stared at me, trying to guess how much I knew, but he had no idea. I let him stew in that uncertainty for a moment, stirring a bit of honey into my tea, watching the liquid swirl into warm gold. Finally, he pushed a hand through his hair and nodded. Okay, I'll go. His voice lacked conviction, but guilt makes men obedient. We drove to the clinic in near silence. He tapped his fingers on his thigh anxiously. I watched the passing streets with detached calm. Every few minutes, he glanced at me as if waiting for an explosion, but I wouldn't give him one. He didn't deserve my rage. I'd give him something much colder. When we parked outside the clinic, he exhaled slowly, like he was preparing for impact. You ready? He asked. I nodded and opened my door first. Always. The waiting room smelled of lavender disinfectant, comforting and clinical at the same time. A young couple sat in the corner, their hands tightly intertwined. A woman about my age flipped through a pregnancy pamphlet, her face hopeful and glowing. A grandmotherly lady across the room crocheted a tiny baby blanket in soft yellow yarn. Daniel shifted uncomfortably as he took in the scene. He didn't belong here, and he knew it. I checked us in with the receptionist, who smiled warmly. 8-week appointment, right? Yes, I replied. She glanced at Daniel. Dad looks nervous. He forced a laugh. You have no idea. I watched him closely. His hands were trembling. Good. We sat together in the small examination room. The paper on the exam table crankled loudly each time he shifted. He looked like a man sitting on a witness stand waiting for the verdict. I kept my voice soft. Are you okay? He whispered, staring at the floor. Yeah. Sure? You seem tense. I'm fine. But sweat was gathering along his hairline. The doctor entered, a kind woman in her mid-40s with a soothing voice. Anna, it's good to see you. And this must be Dad? Daniel's eyes darted to me. I answered before he could speak. Yes, this is Daniel. It's always wonderful when both parents come, the doctor said warmly. It shows commitment and support. Daniel swallowed sharply. Commitment. Support. 2 words he couldn't even spell anymore. Let's get started, the doctor said. Daniel wiped his palms on his jeans. The doctor prepared the equipment. The machine hummed softly. The dim overhead lighting made everything feel intimate. Are you ready to see your little one? Daniel stiffened. My heart was steady, painfully steady. The doctor began the scan. Daniel stared at the monitor, frozen. His eyes darted, desperately searching for something, anything, that could save him. A blob, a shape, a heartbeat, something real, something alive, something he could use to justify himself.
But of course, there was nothing. No fetus, no sac, no heartbeat, no life, just an empty screen. A quiet, echoing absence. The doctor frowned, adjusting the settings. That's strange. Daniel's eyes widened in terror. She tried again, and again, and then she looked at me, confused. Anna, are you sure about your dates? I slowly, deliberately turned my head toward Daniel. He nearly stopped breathing. I'm absolutely sure, I whispered. His face drained of color. He turned away, rubbing his forehead, trying to hide the way guilt was ripping through him. The doctor cleared her throat. I'm not seeing a pregnancy here. Silence. Deep. Heavy. Accusatory. I watched Daniel's throat bob as he swallowed. The doctor continued, sometimes early scans can be unclear. We may need to run a few tests. I interrupted, my voice gentle but unwavering. No, that won't be necessary. Daniel finally looked at me. His eyes were full of dread, the kind that comes when a man realizes he has stepped straight into the consequence he created with his own hands. I held his gaze as I said softly, I know exactly what I'm doing. The doctor hesitated, sensing the tension, but respecting the boundary. All right, I'll give you two a moment. She stepped out, leaving us alone in the quiet room. Daniel stared at the blank monitor, the absence of life staring directly back at him. And for the first time, he knew the truth. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't confusion. This was intentional. And he was trapped. His voice trembled when he finally spoke. Anna, what is this? I tilted my head slightly, offering him a soft, almost pitying smile. This, Daniel? I whispered. This is the moment you start telling me the truth. His lips parted, but before he could lie again, I reached into my purse, opened the email, and turned the screen toward him. The photo, the bed, his bare chest, her rose-colored sheets, his ring missing. Daniel's soul left his body in real time. He whispered, Anna, please. But I raised a hand softly. Not yet. You've had enough space to speak. Now it's my turn. I leaned back in the chair, calm as water, powerful as a verdict. We're going to talk about Lily now. Daniel sat frozen in the examination room, staring at the photo on my phone, as though it were a piece of evidence in a courtroom. His shoulders slumped, his hands fidgeting nervously in his lap. For the first time in months, he didn't try to justify himself, didn't stumble over 1,000 excuses. He was exposed. I watched him carefully, keeping my voice low, deliberate. Do you see now why I needed to be sure? His throat bobbed. He swallowed repeatedly. I didn't mean for it to go this far. Meaning? I asked, voice calm but cold. Meaning that cheating on me, lying to me, lying to her, that's somehow acceptable? He flinched. I could almost see the fragments of the man I once trusted crumbling inside him. His lips parted, closed, parted again, searching for the right words that didn't exist. There's no excuse, I continued softly. Do you understand that? Yes, he whispered. I let the silence stretch for a long moment. Silence can be heavier than 1,000 accusations. It presses down, it fills the room with truth, and it leaves the guilty exposed. Then I leaned forward slightly, my eyes locking on his. You need to call her. His face froze. I want you to call Lily. Tell her it's over. Tell her the truth, that you are married, that that you've been cheating, is over. Daniel shook his head weakly. Anna, I can't. She'll be mad. I smiled faintly, a small curve that hid the storm inside me. Daniel, she already knows. I have proof. And if you don't call her, she will know that you were too cowardly to admit the truth yourself. That's worse than anger. That's humiliation. He hesitated. His hands trembled. Finally, he reached for his phone. I watched him carefully as he dialed. The line rang, and I could hear the faint click as she answered. Lily? His voice cracked, weak, smaller than I had ever heard it. It's Daniel. No, I interrupted softly. Say it clearly. Don't try to charm your way out. Daniel's hands shook so badly that I reached out, lightly touching his arm. Say it, I whispered. He took a deep breath, voice barely above a murmur. I am married. I made a mistake. I am ending things. With you. I'm so sorry. The silence on the other side was deafening. Then she said something that made me suppress a smile. Something raw, human, and victorious in its own right. Finally, took you long enough. Daniel slumped back into the chair, trembling. His face was pale, drained, defeated. The man who once believed he could juggle lies, manipulate hearts, and maintain control over everyone around him was gone. I had never felt more alive. When Daniel hung up, he looked at me, eyes full of panic and shame. She's gone, he whispered. Yes, I said softly. And now you have nothing to hide behind. No lies, no excuses, no mistress to blame. Just you and the truth. He didn't respond. He just stared at the floor, rocking slightly in the chair. I reached out and touched his hand, gentle but firm. Daniel, you've broken the vows, but you haven't broken me, not yet. That's the difference. He flinched at the truth. He nodded, almost unable to process the calm, collected power behind my words. When we left the clinic, he drove in silence. His fingers gripped the wheel so tightly that his knuckles turned white. I didn't speak. Silence was my ally. Every glance he gave me was laced with fear, awe, and, deep down, recognition of the consequences of his actions. By the time we arrived home, the atmosphere in the car had shifted. It was no longer ordinary tension. It was the tension of accountability. I stepped out first, leaving him frozen behind the wheel. I walked into the house deliberately, each footstep echoing in the hallway, like a reminder. I am in control now. Over the next week, I observed Daniel's behavior closely. He stopped lying about minor things. He started attending doctor appointments faithfully. He even offered to help around the house. Small gestures, but they carried weight because they were born out of fear of losing me and the illusion of a normal family life. But fear alone wasn't enough. I needed understanding. I needed reflection. So I gave him tasks, small, deliberate actions to force honesty. Keeping a daily journal of his activities, turning his phone face up on the table, reporting every minor interaction with Lily. He groaned at first, but obedience replaced resistance quickly. He was learning, painfully and slowly, that his previous life of manipulation was over. And I learned something too. The thrill of seeing someone face the mirror of their own deceit is powerful. Not for cruelty, but for justice, for clarity, for dignity. I wasn't cruel. I was precise. I wasn't malicious. I was moral. One evening, I invited my sister, Emily, over. She was sharp, loving, and had always been my confidant. I told her everything, every detail, every lie, every deception. Emily's eyes widened. "Anna, I can't believe she started. I held up a hand. "Don't react, just listen." Then I showed her the photo, the texts, the timeline I had built in my notebook. She gasped softly. "This is meticulous." "Yes. And now Daniel must face the consequences. But I won't humiliate him. That's not my goal." Emily nodded. "You're doing this right, Anna. Not like revenge porn or gossip. You're reclaiming your power." "Exactly." That night, I spoke with Daniel privately. "Your lies are now public, but only to people who need to know. Your actions have consequences, but you still have a choice. Honesty, starting now, can repair what's left. Lying again will end it permanently." He nodded, tears forming in his eyes. "I understand." I smiled faintly. "Good. Let's see if you mean it." Daniel began attending every appointment, sometimes awkwardly, sometimes remorsefully. Every lie he had told began to crumble under the weight of truth. He apologized daily, not for me to forgive him, but because he now understood the pain he caused. And I began to plan the next stage of my life, because even though the baby was fake, the future was real. I had reclaimed my power, my dignity, my voice. And Daniel was learning that a man who deceives can be caught, and that catching him requires patience, strategy, and courage.
The next morning, I woke to a quiet house. Too quiet. Daniel wasn't snoring, the coffee was already made, and the kettle was humming softly on the stove. I realized something. The walls of our home no longer held just secrets. They held tension, and tension has a way of spilling into the world. I had decided that today, the next step of my plan would unfold, not out of cruelty, not for entertainment, but for clarity, for justice, for the message that betrayal carries consequences. I called my sister Emily first. Her voice carried warmth, as if she could sense my anticipation. "I want you to come over today," I said, "and bring your journal. We're going to help Daniel, but he needs witnesses." "Witnesses?" Emily asked, her tone cautious. "Is this dramatic?" "No drama," I said, softly, letting the words land like a calm wave. "Just truth and accountability." When Emily arrived, I had already prepared small, subtle measures to ensure Daniel couldn't avoid scrutiny. His phone was on the kitchen counter, camera up. His laptop was open. Everything documented. He noticed immediately. The tension in his shoulders stiffened. But I didn't need to threaten him. My calm was enough. I invited my parents and my closest friends. Each one arrived slowly, hesitantly. None of them had seen Daniel's betrayal firsthand. None of them knew the full story. When everyone was seated, I cleared my throat. "I want to tell you all something important, something that will affect our family." Daniel shifted uncomfortably beside me. "I've known for weeks," I continued, my voice measured, gentle yet impossible to ignore, "that Daniel has been unfaithful, that he lied to me and to himself." Gasps rippled through the room. Emily leaned forward, whispering, "Oh, Anna." "I know this is hard," I said, "but it's time for honesty. And I have proof." I handed my sister the phone with the photos, the texts. She gasped audibly, eyes wide. I watched as the room absorbed the weight of the betrayal.
Daniel sat frozen, eyes cast downward, trembling. "I have given him a chance to tell the truth," I said, voice steady yet impossible to ignore. "And he has. Today he must face the consequences of his actions." After the family confrontation, the next phase was subtle but public. Daniel's lies had been private, but some of them affected people around him, colleagues, mutual friends, even our neighbors. I couldn't control gossip, but I could ensure truth was told with dignity, not malice. I started small, a careful conversation here, a casual mention there. Daniel and I had a difficult time recently. Some things came out, but we're working through them honestly now. The whispers began immediately. Friends checked in, neighbors exchanged cautious glances. And I noticed the shift in Daniel. He flinched every time someone gave him even a polite glance. The truth was no longer confined to our home. It was a living, breathing thing, and it followed him everywhere. Within days, Daniel realized that avoidance was impossible. He drafted a message, carefully, painfully, and sent it to everyone affected: family, friends, colleagues. "I have made terrible mistakes. I lied, I betrayed trust, and I caused pain. I am truly sorry. I am committed to honesty from this moment forward." Even reading it aloud to me in private, his voice trembled, but the act itself was powerful. The public acknowledgement made his guilt tangible. No hiding, no excuses, no escape. I didn't feel satisfaction. I felt clarity. The man who had tried to manipulate me, deceive me, and compartmentalize his life had finally been stripped of the power to deceive anyone. For weeks after, I observed him closely. He attended therapy sessions, started journaling, and engaged in honest conversations with his friends and colleagues. I didn't push him. I didn't nag. I just watched, a silent witness to his reckoning. At first, his remorse was messy. He broke down crying over small things, over minor failures, over memories of lies that had once seemed harmless. But slowly, Daniel began to show glimpses of understanding. He apologized sincerely when small things went wrong. He asked questions instead of hiding answers. And he started rebuilding trust in deliberate, patient ways. It was still painful. Watching someone you once loved so deeply confront their worst self is never easy, but it was necessary. And through it all, I realized I hadn't done this for revenge. I had done it for life, for dignity, for the understanding that betrayal deserves consequences and redemption requires accountability. As the weeks passed, I began to notice subtle changes in myself. I felt lighter, stronger, more self-assured. I wasn't the woman who had feared loss or doubted her own worth. I was Anna who had faced betrayal, planned carefully, and enforced accountability without losing her moral compass. I forgave, but not blindly. I healed, but not superficially. I reclaimed my life, my power, and my voice. And Daniel, finally understanding the consequences of manipulation, began to support, genuinely, humbly, rather than controlling or deceiving. Reflecting on the fake pregnancy, I realized something crucial. The pregnancy itself wasn't revenge. It was leverage. Leverage that forced Daniel to confront his own morality. Every lie he told, every secret he tried to hide, collapsed when faced with the illusion of life, a life that depended on his honesty. I smiled quietly to myself. Power doesn't have to roar. It can whisper, measured, intentional. And in that whisper, Daniel had learned lessons no lecture could ever teach. I started planning for my own life beyond this betrayal. I enrolled in classes I had postponed for years. I began saving independently. I spent more time with my friends and family. I nurtured myself, my mind, and my emotional resilience. I wanted a life not defined by deception, but by truth, agency, and choice. And Daniel, finally understanding the consequences of manipulation, began to support, genuinely, humbly, rather than controlling or deceiving.
Weeks turned into months. I had survived the storm, the lies, the betrayal, the emotional chaos, but surviving wasn't enough. I needed to heal. I needed to reclaim my life, my identity, and my joy. Daniel had changed, yes, but the healing I needed wasn't just about him. It was about me. I started mornings differently. No longer did I wake to fear or suspicion. I woke to light spilling across the bedroom floor, the scent of brewed coffee curling through the air, the quiet hum of a world that could be predictable, safe, and yet full of possibility. I took long walks, feeling the crunch of autumn leaves beneath my feet. I began to write in my journal every day, not to track Daniel's lies or mine, but to chart my own emotional growth. I survived this, I wrote one morning, pen trembling slightly. Not because I trapped him, not because I proved him wrong. I survived because I didn't lose myself, and I won't. I began reading books I'd put off for years, taking cooking classes, reconnecting with friends I'd neglected. Every small act of self-care was a stitch in the fabric of my restored life. Daniel watched quietly, learning patience. He learned that healing wasn't instant. It wasn't just apologizing. It was listening. It was understanding. It was taking responsibility every single day. Daniel wasn't perfect. He had moments of insecurity, guilt, and regret, natural human reactions, but he no longer tried to hide, no longer tried to manipulate, no longer assumed I would forgive without evidence of change. He attended counseling sessions regularly, sometimes with me, sometimes alone. He spoke openly, sometimes awkwardly, about the mistakes he had made, the pain he had caused, and the fear he had once felt about losing me. One evening, I caught him on the porch, watching the sunset, notebook in hand. He was scribbling furiously. "What are you writing?" I asked softly. "His reflections," he admitted, "about everything, about us, about what I've done wrong, about how I can do better." I nodded, silently approving, not because I needed him to improve for me, but because the world had a way of giving everyone lessons, and this was his. Trust wasn't rebuilt overnight. It was slow, methodical, cautious. I began by setting small boundaries, weekly check-ins, honest conversations, open discussions about social interactions, and he adhered to them. Reluctantly at first, but then willingly. I learned something important. Trust is not about believing someone will never hurt you. It's about knowing they understand the consequences of their actions and that they are willing to work every day to make amends. Daniel proved this. He even made small gestures that touched me, fixing the leaky kitchen faucet without being asked, making my favorite breakfast on a random Tuesday morning, leaving a note on my pillow that said, "I am learning. I am trying." The gestures were small,
but they were honest. And honesty is what I had been missing for so long. Forgiveness wasn't immediate. There were nights I lay awake thinking of Lily, the mistress, the secret, the temptation, but she exists in the past now, as does the fear, the tears, the anger. Daniel and I are still together, yes, but in a way that is different. It's honest, deliberate, and measured. Every day is a choice. Every action is proof. Every conversation is a reminder that truth, even when painful, is the only foundation strong enough to hold a life together. I smile quietly when I think about the journey, the strategy, the patience, the lessons learned, because for every betrayal, there is clarity. For every lie, there is truth. For every pain, there is growth. I am Anna. I survived. I thrived. And I will never forget the lessons of power, patience, and moral courage that carried me through the darkest chapters of my life.
The house was quiet that evening, the kind of quiet that doesn't press, doesn't demand attention, but hums softly with life. A gentle reminder that the storm had passed. I sat by the window, watching the last light of the sun fade behind the rooftops. The sky was a soft blend of pink and gray, the air cool but comforting. I could smell the faint aroma of tea lingering on the counter and the faint scent of Daniel's cologne in the hallway. Both familiar, both ordinary, both real. For the first time in months, I felt at peace. Daniel joined me quietly, not asking for permission, just sitting down across from me at the small kitchen table. He looked tired, worn, and yet honest. "I've been thinking," he began, his voice low, almost afraid, "about everything I did, everything I lost." I nodded slowly, waiting. He continued, "I wanted to run, to avoid the shame, the guilt, the judgment. But I can't anymore. Not after everything you've done, not to me, not to yourself. You didn't act out of hatred. You acted out of clarity, out of strength. I owe you more than words." I reached across the table and placed my hand lightly over his. "Daniel, what matters now is not guilt. It's honesty. And you've shown me that you can be honest even when it's difficult." He nodded, tears brimming. "I will never forget what you've taught me about respect, about consequences, about patience, about being human." We sat in silence for a while, just two people who had been broken and were slowly learning how to put themselves back together. I reflected on the months that had passed, the betrayal, the fake pregnancy, the public exposure, the personal healing. Every step had been deliberate. Every step had carried weight. I realized that my revenge had not been about humiliation or anger. It had been about creating a mirror in which Daniel could see himself clearly. And it worked. The man who had lied, deceived, and manipulated was now facing life with accountability. And the woman who had been hurt, betrayed, and doubted herself, she had reclaimed her strength, her dignity, her power. The lessons learned. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of clarity settle in my chest. Lesson 1, patience is power. Rushing through anger or revenge might satisfy a fleeting moment, but the most profound justice comes from careful, strategic action. Lesson 2, truth exposes the liar faster than confrontation ever could. The fake pregnancy wasn't cruel, it was leverage. It forced honesty, accountability, and reflection. Lesson 3. Forgiveness is freedom. Not for him, not for Lily, not for anyone, but me. Forgiving, releasing, and moving forward gave me the clarity I needed to thrive. Lesson 4. Healing is active, not passive. I nurtured myself, my passions, my mind, and my heart. The betrayal had been a storm, but I had become the calm afterward. Lesson 5. Trust can be rebuilt, but only on honesty. Daniel's redemption wasn't immediate. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. And real is always worth striving for. Months later, our lives began to feel almost ordinary again. A normal rhythm with extraordinary lessons woven into it. I started a small writing project, documenting life, relationships, human emotion, inspired by everything I had endured. I wanted to share stories like mine, stories of betrayal, resilience, moral courage, and redemption. Daniel, now more attentive and reflective, supported me. Not controlling, not hiding, not demanding, just present. The trust between us wasn't restored overnight, but every day, small acts of honesty and care built a bridge back to a new, healthier relationship. We laughed again. We argued respectfully again. We shared meals without suspicion, conversations without secrecy, and silences without fear. I realized that life's greatest lessons are often learned in the darkest moments, and the darkest moments often make the light shine brighter. If you've ever faced betrayal by a partner, a friend, a family member, remember this: strategy is more powerful than anger. Clarity is stronger than chaos. Patience can be your greatest ally. And truth and accountability are the keys to healing both for yourself and for those who hurt you. And most importantly, your strength is never defined by someone else's lies. I share my story not to glorify revenge, but to show that empowerment comes from careful action, self-respect, and moral clarity. If you've been in my shoes, ask yourself, would you have acted with patience? Would you have created clarity? Would you have chosen freedom over hatred? As the evening settled, I stood by the window once more, watching the sky turn a deep, serene navy. The lights of the city flickered below, alive with ordinary life, ordinary people, ordinary stories. I smiled softly to myself. I am Anna. I am not defined by betrayal. I am not limited by lies. I am stronger. I am free. And the journey continues. Would you have done what I did? Would you have found patience, strategy, and moral courage in the face of betrayal? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your story matters. Your voice matters. And if my journey taught you any one lesson, consider subscribing, because life is full of lessons, and together we can explore them all.